Traders, how are you? With Marcello, founder of the Day Trading Academy. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. We have Walgreens now rationing baby food formula, Elon Musk buying Twitter. They now have successfully changed the age of skin cells, which means that if you're young enough, you're going to be able to live forever, and more sanctions in Ukraine. Let's get started. Overall for the week, U.S. markets are lower in addition to Canada. Biggest news kind of out there this week outside of what's happening in Ukraine with the war in Russia, with the war in Ukraine from Russia, I said it backwards, is that Elon Musk bought Twitter. That helped a lot. In the beginning of the week on Monday, we saw Twitter surge quite a bit. I'm going to give you that percentage here in just a moment. He took a 9.2% stake in the company and made an agreement with Twitter that he wouldn't buy more shares if they put him on the actual board. Now, remember, this was after he actually did a survey on Twitter asking if Twitter complied with, let's say, free market principles like free speech. And if I remember correctly, I think the survey said that 71% said that no, they don't, which is probably why he's getting a little bit involved. Overall, overseas market news, Europe, most markets are mixed. We had Istanbul and Russia being the biggest winners and losers at around 6% each. Latin American markets are mostly lower as well, with the Mexican markets being most negative of all. In Africa and the Middle East, we have Saudi Arabia being most positive of all, 1.70%, and then Asia and Australian markets being mixed this week, with the Nikkei in Japan being the biggest loser. And the biggest winners really, 1-2% or so. We have Indonesia almost hitting 2% positive for the week. On Tuesday, in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency news, German's authorities seized $25.3 million worth of Bitcoin after shutting what they call the world's largest and longest running website on the dark web called the Hydra Market. Supposedly, there's $5.2 billion in cryptocurrency that actually swapped hands there on the overall market. And they supposedly had 80% of all the dark net market related information there on the website. The CME, which is the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, is the biggest exchange operator in the world, meaning that they operate the biggest exchanges, stock exchanges, futures exchanges, mostly futures, but we won't get into that technicality. Biggest operator in the world for exchanges. They are now looking to add Solana and Cardano futures to their product line. They already have Ethereum and Bitcoin. So it looks like they're starting to creep in a little bit more as well. Intel is looking to come out with a new chip to be able to help specifically miners overall. And remember that I think it was only 2 million Bitcoins now are left to mine. Bitcoin lower this week. It went down 9.89% overall to about 46,619 or so. Negative for the year, but that doesn't really mean much for Bitcoin, right? Because it's so volatile overall. In Miami, they just launched a new stock market bull, huge black with the Bitcoin eyes. That was all the rave this week on the social webs. Take a look at that, because obviously Bitcoin, and Miami specifically, is going all in on Bitcoin, kind of like El Salvador. In commodities, Walgreens, if you guys see the picture here in just a moment, is going to start rationing baby formula. So, you and I talked about the food situation and how we were probably going to have shortages in 2020, and now the mainstream media is starting to talk about it quite a bit. Unfortunately, baby formula is not something that we want to see go out of style. In a first world country like the United States, we shouldn't have shortages, but it is that is the way the cookie crumbles. The preppers were right. Germany is fighting inflation by quite a bit. A company called Aldi, which is a supermarket chain, a low-cost supermarket chain, which is based out of Germany, they increased their prices between 20 and 50%. So if you want to believe the government that the inflation rate is only 7% or so, you and I both know that it's a lot higher than that. And if they actually calculated the amount the inflation rate, the way that they calculated it back in 1980, the actual inflation rate right now, according to the government statistics, would be about over 16%. Now, you and I know that the actual inflation rate, because the government doesn't take into account, for example, food and energy, because you and I don't need to drive to work, nor do we need to eat, is actually probably more like 20 or 30% last year. I think this year it could probably hit 30 to 50% or so. I haven't been in the US to be able to see the difference in prices, so I'm not able to tell you exactly what it is just yet. Netherlands inflation spiked to 11.9%, the biggest in decades. Their energy component, which remember that the numbers for the government don't account for, went up to 102% compared to last year. One of France's most important government officials said that we should brace ourselves for an extremely serious global food crisis. I would recommend, who am I, right? But I would recommend you guys go to Sam's Club or Costco or one of these warehouse stores. They have them everywhere. In Europe, it might be a little bit different. Walmart, and buy cans of tuna, cans of roast beef, cans of corn, cans of vegetables, and just keep a little extra in your house. Peanut butter, pasta, seal it. It lasts for a while. And then there's a lot of these. I was going to do a video for you guys about how to prepare for the end of the world, Marcello style, because, you know, the preppers were right. How to buy this food that lasts 25 years. There's a company I like called Augustin Farms. You can get it from Walmart or even Amazon. And I would highly recommend you just, you know, every week, just buy a little bit extra, right? The cans of food, buy the last 5-7 years. These packs of food last 25 years. And wait until I get into why the EU is preparing emergency supplies for nuclear, biological, and chemical emergencies. Right? I always told you guys, don't pay attention to what they say. Pay attention to what they do. Why would the European Union be prepared for that? The preppers were right. International Energy Agency member countries have released 60 million barrels of oil from their emergency reserves. This is on top of the United States releasing 180 million last week. That means that crude oil for the week went down. The U.S. crude went down just over 1%, while Brent went down 1.56%. U.S. crude is about $100, whereas the Brent is about $103, just shy of that. The energy giant Shell, which is Dutch and British owned, is taking a $4 to $5 billion hit, a write-off on their assets in Russia as they're officially leaving that market completely. And Elon Musk is also saying that Tesla may go into the lithium mining and refining business directly at a large scale due to the fact that the cost of lithium is rising quite a bit. And obviously that's the main materials that goes into the batteries for the electric vehicles, which is kind of the direction that the whole world is heading in. It's gone up, lithium, at an amount of 480% over the last year. And for all you environmentalists, I recommend that you guys look at the mines of lithium, where they're located, and the damage they do to the environment compared to just, you know, a little pipe that goes into the ground for oil. Precious metals for the week. Gold went up 1.09% to 1,947. Silver went up 0.60% to 24.87. Great volatility in the silver miners. You guys know that I'm heavy into the silver miners for swing trading. Financial and banking news. The U.S. inflation hit a 40-year high at 7.9%. That's a 12 months ending in February. So February 2021 to February 2022. And remember that little chart that I showed you. They should put it up right now. Again, the official number is over 16% if they actually use the calculation that they used in 1980 before they changed it. Rising U.S. interest rates, crushing the mortgage market. Fewer homeowners now are benefiting from a refinance, and more home buyers are priced out. The total mortgage app volume fell another 6%. It's down 41% from a year ago, and the rate is now at 4.9% compared to the 3.36% from a year ago. And remember that the housing market is a big chunk of the economy. I think the number off the top of my head was 17%, 15 to 17% of the entire U.S. economy, which is still number one. The mortgage apps on a purchase home fell 3% for the week and are 9% lower than a year ago, even though the volume, remember, is down 41% for a year ago. Beginning in May, Fed officials agreed to double roll off the balance sheet. So they're doubling down and reducing the balance sheet by double what they were planning to do. If you guys don't know what's kind of happened over the last few years, I'm just going to do a quick summary to kind of catch you guys up, right? Because, we got to clarify things in the recap. So in 1999, there was a hedge fund that collapsed. It's called the Long-Term Capital Management. This hedge fund, since it was so entwined into the economy, the governments of the United States mainly and Europe decided to go ahead and sell off pieces of it to different banks and hedge funds. So instead of doing the capitalism thing and letting it fail, they wanted to avoid that. And so they literally let the toxic system just spread out to the entire financial system. Well, what's the worst that could happen? 2009 financial crisis. So 1999, hedge fund collapse, they save it, right? 2009, the financial system collapses, and what do? They save it. They drop interest rates to the lowest records in recorded history. They pump an unlimited amount of money into the economy to kind of boost the economy. And so they don't let it fail again, right? So then what happens in 2019, 20-ish, we should have had kind of the next crisis, and that's when the pandemic hit. And so instead of letting that, how do I say this? Letting the system works the way it's supposed to, right? It's supposed to be an ebb and flow, expansion and contraction. Whenever we have a recession or a depression, that's supposed to get all the garbage out of the system, let's say, right? Companies that aren't making money, for example. And so now, since they're going to double down on the amount of money that they're taking out that they put in before, when the bubble pops, it's going to be very, very not bueno. Just so you know. So that's kind of the summary of what's happened. And when this bubble finally bursts, it'll probably going to be the new financial system and the world order and, government coin. And you're going to be cut off because they can just turn off your money because you don't smile at somebody on the street. And, you guys know it's coming, right? So that's the review of what's happened in the last, 20 years? Mortgage apps, I mentioned that. The beginning in May, I mentioned that as well. Let me get caught up here. Political news, Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban, he declared victory in the parliamentary elections, getting 71% of all the votes counted. It's going to be his fourth term in power, consecutive term. So he's in power now until 2026. And then on Monday, the Hong Kong chief executive, Carrie Lam, stated that she's not going to pursue a second term in office after she just handed over Hong Kong to China. And for those of you guys that are listening on the podcast, I saw some of you guys in the comments there. Just look for me if you guys want to see the videos on YouTube, Marcello Arrambide Trader or, Marcello DTA Trader. The old channel used to be called Wandering Trader, but they took down the DTA channel for, whatever reason, and they didn't tell me. So just look for, Marcello Arrambide Trader or Marcello Arrambide Recap, and you should be able to come it up. Economic news, Americans filing for new claims on unemployment benefits fell last week. So people asking for help for being unemployed fell last week. That means that it's a further tightening of the labor market, which means that we're most likely going to have a situation where the inflation is elevated. So if there's a tightening of the labor market, that essentially means that workers are more competitive to companies, which means that companies are going to pay more for workers, which means that if they pay more for workers, the biggest cost in any business, especially in the US and Europe and industrialized countries, is labor. So if they pay more for workers, that means that they have to make sure that they cover those worker salaries with higher priced products and services, which means that, remember that it's not just when they contract the worker, every year they raise the price of the workers, which means that that's why inflation is going to stay probably elevated, at least in the short to medium term. Other than that, Chinese services sector saw a sharp contraction in March. It declined quite a bit to the number of 42. And the PMI, whenever it comes out, if you guys see the bobbleheads on the mainstream news talking about it, essentially a number below 50 is contraction, above 50 is expansion. But the expectation was that it was going to continue to expand, and it went down by quite a bit. In corporate news, Twitter soared 27% after Musk took his stake, $2.89 billion. Remember that he's worth $273 billion, which is $100 billion more than the next richest man, which is Jeff Bezos. Stocks in the Starbucks Corporation went down 3.7% on Monday after CEO Howard Schultz announced that the company was going to stop their repurchasing program. Tesla shares went up over 5% to $1,145 on Monday. Over the last few weeks, it's gone from $800 to $1,100 due to its recent production figures. They just officially opened their Gigafactory in Texas. And remember that they moved their corporate headquarters from the communist state of California to the free state of Texas. And now one of the things I saw in the presentation that Elon Musk talked about was in the last rolling 12 months, they've delivered 1 million vehicles. And supposedly this coming year, they're going to start production on the Cybertruck and also the Semi, which based on the amount of time that whenever he says something is going to be produced, is probably still 5 years away. Other than that, JetBlue made an unsolicited $3.6 billion takeover bid for Spirit Airlines, which is great because Spirit Airlines sucks. And other than that, Samsung reported their operating profit jumped nearly 50% compared to a year ago at $11.6 billion. It's the highest quarter one profit since 2018 based on the prices mainly for the memory chips. They did sell 72 million smartphones. I haven't upgraded to the new smartphone yet because I don't like how they remove the SD card and you can't open it. It's like everything's turning into Apple basically, but the revenue did rise 18% as well compared to the same year prior. And Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway took an 11.4% stake in HP worth $4.2 billion. The stock reached a record high on Thursday at $40.72. Obviously, when Warren Buffett buys some things, you know it's amazing, even though I would never recommend HP's computers because they are horrible. Trade news. U.S. Congress voted to revoke Russia's trade status and ban oil and gas imports. If you guys remember, they supposedly put these sanctions on Russia that were going to harm them, but we still were paying them for the oil that we were importing. Remember that? They're banning new investment into the country. They also sanctioned Putin's daughters after there was unfortunately some reports of rape and torture against civilians by the Russian military forces in Ukraine. On Friday, also, the European Union approved a fifth round of restrictive measures on Russia. They're going to put an embargo on coal, wood, chemicals, and other products as well. That's about 10% of the imports from the country, but notice they didn't ban gas or oil, which they keep importing from Russia. Come on, guys. Think we're stupid? And even other than that, they're going to put more sanctions on individuals and other people and blah, 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 blah. But what I thought was most interesting is what I mentioned to you guys in the beginning of the video was that the EU is building up its strategic reserves for chemical, biological, and radionuclear emergency. The Union mobilized medical reserve unit to procure potassium iodide tablets. So as I always mention to you guys, don't pay attention to what they say because they all talk too much Scheiße. If you guys don't know what Scheiße means, look it up. It's in German. Never listen to what they say. Always pay attention to what they do. Why would Europe, a mostly non-war, non-confrontational kind of group of countries, all of a sudden decide to stock up on reserves for chemical, biological, and radionuclear emergencies? The preppers were right. Moving on. Technology, Tesla and SpaceX owner, billionaire Elon Musk believes that humans are going to be eventually able to live forever by downloading their brains into robots. He has Neuralink, which is one of his startup ventures, which is developing brain to human interfaces. And the U.S. Air Force, listen to this. The U.S. Air Force is delaying the hypersonic missile program over flight test anomalies, meaning that the United States, the most powerful military in the world, doesn't have hypersonic missiles when Russia is already using them in the war in Ukraine. International events, Ukrainian President Zelensky is accusing Russian forces of committing genocide after the aftermath of reports of the devastation in the city of Bucha or Bucha. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that right. It's a city near Kiev, which is the capital. Finland and Sweden now are considering joining NATO. due to the situation in Russia. Obviously, they border Russia. If you guys didn't know, on the northern side of Europe, kind of the top part on the right, they border Russia close to St. Petersburg, which is an amazing city. I'm glad I went for the World Cup. But they're normally neutral. Obviously, Russia doesn't want NATO right on their border, just like the United States wouldn't want Russia in Mexico, for example. But now they're considering joining NATO due to the fact that obviously the aggression that Russia showed in Ukraine. And then the usual facts this week, France may increase its retirement age from 62 to 65 after several failed attempts. France has one of the biggest bloated social systems in the world, and it has one of the earliest retirement ages of all industrialized nations. Some 16,000 foreign fighters have flocked to Ukraine into Russia to be able to fight. And Russia's at the University of Toronto Faculty of Applied Sciences and Engineering have leveraged quantum mechanics, big words here, to optimize an active layer within a device known as an inverted perovskite solar cell, which basically means they developed new technology to make solar panels at a fraction of the cost, which is great because renewable energy, whether it's wind or solar, still isn't on par with things like coal and oil and things like that. So obviously, if we can bring the cost down for renewable energy, then the market will implement it without all these government subsidies. Research at this one's pretty cool. Research at the Babraham Institute has developed a method to time jump human skin cells by 30 years, turning back the aging clock for cells without losing their specialized function. The workers by researchers, I'm reading this word for word, workers by researchers in the epigenetics research program have been able to partly restore the function of older cells, as well as rejuvenating the molecular measures of biological age. So if we don't die with the world war that's happening in Ukraine, you might be able to live forever. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. I love you. Prepare yourself. The preppers were right. Bye.